Hello, everybody. It's so nice to have everybody here, and I see our audience is slowly joining as well. So I will say officially welcome and hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to February edition of Data Talk Series, Navigating the Artificial Intelligence Ethics Landscape, Guidelines for Practitioners, organized by the Data Innovation Lab. My name is Branka Panic, and I'm a senior advisor to the Data Innovation Lab, and I'm thrilled to welcome you all to our discussion. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat and let us know where you're coming from and maybe what brings you to the AI ethics and AI governance conversation. And while you are doing that, I will just quickly introduce our host today, because Data Innovation Lab is quite a new institution established by the German Federal Foreign Office and GovTech campus in Germany in June 2023. And it aims to play a crucial role in this future where human-centered work and data-driven work and insights play together and synergize to create sustainable development, achieve sustainable development, and enable global collaboration, cooperation around AI and data-driven issues. Data Innovation Lab functions as an innovative platform for collaboration, for creating partnerships between local actors, but also governments, civil society organizations, UN agencies, tech companies as well, private sector, academia in Germany, but also globally. And data and AI ethics are in the center of the work of the Data Innovation Lab, and with the goal of advancing the principles and practice of AI ethics work, Data Innovation Lab serves as this hub for new ideas, for shaping discussions and dialogue, for setting standards and practices of ethical utilization of data and ethical innovation. And now, as we are following this topic for many years, sometimes we organize new conversations on new topics, but the ethics is, of course, not a new conversation. As we were following this topic for many, many years, we noticed that this conversation moved in a way from being a niche topic to maybe a broader conversation, engaging now different actors. It's a multi-sectoral conversation now, engaging governments, corporations, international organizations. Many of these organizations established different expert groups. They adopted different standards and principles. We found this information, and maybe our guest panelists will be able to tell us more about this, that there are even more than 600 different adopted principles and documents across different across different countries in the world. And these initiatives, of course, include those that guide our work as well, like the OECD AI principles, or of course, UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence. 2023, I think, was an extremely interesting year in this direction, because some other parts of the world started advancing this work as well, such as the first Latin American and Caribbean Ministerial and High-Level Summit on Ethics in Chile. Then draft conceptual framework on the continental strategy on AI in Africa that was announced as a part of AI agenda of the African Union summit in Ethiopia last year. Then the UN opened this new body, the high-level advisory body on AI, that brought some interesting advancements in the field. And many, many other initiatives. I think 2023 was really so rich with all of these processes. What brings us to the center of these processes in conversation is that actually Germany is on an interesting path now of drafting the Federal Foreign Office AI ethics strategy. So we are really looking forward to hearing more from our hosts about this process and how the Federal Foreign Office came to this idea, what guides this idea, and what can we learn together in this process. Here we are. It's just the beginning of the 2024. And even though it's the beginning, we have other initiatives, some exciting happenings that have been announced, such as I want to start with this because this is one of the reasons why we are organizing this conversation in February, such as the announcement of Global AI Ethics Observatory and the UNESCO AI Ethics Experts Without Borders Network that were just freshly announced at the second Global Forum on the Ethics of AI in Slovenia. Gabriela, we were eagerly following this online. It was very nice to put all of this content available for people across the world. So we are really excited to hear more about what these new initiatives are bringing to the field. And I would actually like to open the discussion with these latest achievements of UNESCO, because of this amazing work of UNESCO, the work that UNESCO has been providing for many years now. I think the entire ecosystem grew out of this work and can be committed now, can be enabled and empowered to actually bring some of these UNESCO ethical principles to practice. So with this, please allow me to introduce Gabriela Ramos. I don't think, Gabriela, you don't even need an introduction, but I want to say that we really see you as a champion in this work, as somebody who has been so committed in bringing putting ethics in the center of the AI conversation and really helping us to figure out how to bring these principles to practice. You have been working tirelessly on this. Sometimes I think you build your own AI agents to cover all of these conferences and conversations, but we are really, really grateful for your time. And I want to give the floor now to you. So you set the scene in a way for our conversation. Tell us what happened in Slovenia. We will start with this keynote or fireside chat just for the audience to introduce that. We will have a short introduction from you. Unfortunately, Gabriela cannot stay with us until the end of the conversation, but we will have a short Q&A immediately after her introduction. So think about questions that you would like to ask Gabriela, and then we will have a short 10-minute Q&A to facilitate a more in-depth conversation. Without further ado, Gabriela, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Branka, and thank you for your generous introduction, because actually I have to say that I feel very strong because Emma Rutkamblom is here. She was the chair of the group that drafted the recommendation, and Nicola, who helped us produce the readiness assessment methodology. They have also been very well engaged, and I think that's what and you yourself with the Women for Ethical AI. So I'm in very good company. And I have to say that this debate regarding ethics, and also in the context of the German reflection, which I feel is very important, because of course Germany is a leader in the technological developments, but also now that the European Union adopted the AI Acts, now is time to reflect how do we implement them. And therefore, for us, during the last 2 years, we have been moving into the implementation. And I think this is what has produced very good outcomes in terms of being a little bit ahead of the curve for UNESCO, because it was not only the framing of the discussion on the technological developments in an ethical way, not only the principles, because as you say, 600 principles are quite a large group in terms of the contributions that all the institutions can make, but because the recommendation was not only about principles. It had the values, which was human rights, human dignity, sustainability, fairness, and all of the things that we want the technologies to deliver. And actually, I would say not even the technologies, because it was not a technological discussion, it was a societal one. And therefore, what kind of societies do we want to have that these technologies are going to help us shape? And I think this was the different way in which we frame it. That was kind of an isolated view 3 years ago, 2 years ago. And now, because of generative AI, the exponential capabilities of generative AI, but also the exponential unknowns in terms of their impact, I think that we are converging. And then, of course, the executive order in the US, the AI Acts in Europe, the Safety Summit in the UK, the Hiroshima process, all of these processes that are going around that I feel are converging into looking at how do we build more inclusive societies with these technological inputs, which is the call of UNESCO. This is exactly the ethical framing. The ethical framing is nothing more and nothing else than to align the technological disruptions into something that is positive for humankind. And the big question, of course, is that we see that the way the technologies are being developed, because they are highly concentrated in the hands of few countries, few firms, the fact that we have not a very great representation in the data sets, but now that when you have open source, there's also the question of what kind of information is available in the cyberspace, when you have half of the population not having access to stable internet services. So still we are with the very same questions of whether we are going to be building more inclusive societies, or we are just going to be repeating the inequalities and the discrimination that we have in the real world. So this is the real question. The forum was exciting because I feel that it was timely, and we were expecting 30 member states to come, because the recommendation, as you said, Branka, also is not, it has an implementing comprehensive plan based on the readiness assessment methodology that is being now applied to 50 countries all around the world. And this is super important because you cannot come with a one size fits all and say, okay, the risk-based approach of the Europe, we can just internationalize it. No, you have very different circumstances of countries, you have very different capacities, but also you have very different perspectives of what they want to do with the technologies. And therefore, we produce this readiness assessment methodology, and now we deploying it to 50 countries. So we were expecting 30 to come to discuss their experience with these common metrics, which is very important because I feel that this is a global conversation, and therefore having some standardized measures and metrics for countries to exchange their experience on how to govern the technologies better is positive. And we finished with 67 countries from all over the world. And then we started receiving requests. We are working with the G20 in Brazil. They wanted to have one panel on inequalities because that's the way that President Lula is framing the debate in the G20. How do we move and address the question of inequalities? We got the G7. We're working with the G7, also are using a lot the ethical framework, and we had got a very good message from the Minister of State of Digital. And then we got Amandeep, who also the tech envoy of the UN Secretary General. He came with his experts. Emma is part of the group to discuss and do the consultations of the first report that they produced, and they received this feedback in terms of moving the agenda forward, which is positive, but not forgetting that there are already very important processes all the way. And therefore, the forum was like a converging force for so many people that are now not talking about the threats, not talking about the technology, but talking about the solutions. And this is what is inspiring, because the conversation is shifting a little bit between the trying to understand exactly how the transparency, the accountability, or the liability, or the very concrete auditings, all the tools that we have to frame the AI life cycle, into who is going to be producing the policies, who is going to be producing the frameworks, who is going to be ensuring that the outcomes are positive. And also moving away from the question of do we regulate or not, because I think that's a super simplistic question. I'm a policy person. I have been working only on policies all of my life, and it's not only about regulations. But there is not a single economic sector in the world that is not framed by policies, by tools, by interventions, by investments, by incentives. And therefore, I feel that this should not be the exception. And this is one of the outcomes also that we got from Slovenia, that we were really looking at what are the tools. Learning from the technologies, yes, and that's why we launched the Observatory on the Ethics of Artificial Intelligence. But more importantly, learning at which policies can help us frame the technologies. What kind of fiscal rules, what kind of investments, what kind of incentives, because these are technologies that are going to be also following these leads in the markets, and what kind of policies produce what kind of outcomes. And we have it there. For example, very simple. If all the countries were to look at redressing the gender inequalities in the development of these technologies, and we know that women are even way less represented than in the STEM or in many other very male-dominated sectors. Well, it's very straightforward. Affirmative action, dedicated budgets from public procurement to women-led AI developments, looking at financial incentives for the big investors to put more investments in women-led companies. And these things are shaped, as I said, by policy. So this is very important, and I feel that what we are really proud of is that we need to make this a debate of how do we produce the policies and the decisions to frame the technologies. And this leads me to other outcome of Slovenia. 67 countries, but the recommendation bounds 194 countries together. And therefore is the only, up to now, the only real global standard that exists, framing very detailed issues on how to govern the technologies. But then we got a lot of voices from the global south. And I think that was important because I was in the safety summit in the UK, which was really interesting. I have been in the G20, in the G7, and those are important conversations because no doubt these are the major developers, the economies that develop the majority of the technologies. But it cannot be among those that develop the technologies because it's reaching the whole world. And the majority of the countries coming from Southeast Asia, from Africa, from Latin America, Chile, who is heading our Council for the Implementation of the Recommendation in Latin America and the Caribbean, they sent a very, very interesting message that I have not heard in many other places, which is we do not want to be only consumers of these technologies. It's fine if we are going to equip ourselves to understand the technologies and to deploy them in a safe way, but it cannot be that we are just going into the market and seeing what is there that suit our needs and we buy it. No, we want to develop our own technologies. And I think this is the kind of ambition that we need to have, because the technologies are pairing with it our history, our mindset, our culture, our needs, our identities. And therefore, I feel it's very important that all the countries have the capacity not only to regulate and to use and to deploy and to adopt, because it's important that no country is left behind in terms of the technological development, but that they are also, it's also in their hands to develop their own technologies. And I think this is very important because when we think about controlling downside risks, a major downside risk is that you manage or administer your health sector on the basis of a platform that is provided with you in the commercial sector. I think these things are just opening the door to many other downside risk, and it's important that we get this up to the speed. Great challenges, of course. If you see the executive order of President Biden, I was really intrigued by the fact that besides the ex-ante assessment, which is something that the recommendation is always calling for, or the red teamings, no, to bring the controls of people that were not engaged in the development of the technologies before they are deployed. They also include the question of attracting talents. And if the major economy of the world has as a priority to attract talents, you know what is the most important issue in this technological revolution, which is to bring the people, the skills, to get the education systems, the research systems, to invest in research. This is also a government priority, to ensure that you are well equipped not only in terms of IPRs or of all the very complex issues related to the technological development, but in terms of having the innovative and the creative environment and the tools in your people, in your system, to advance in this very important technological revolution. So I leave the entry point there. You gave me 10 minutes. It's 10 minutes already, but ready to continue the conversation because it was quite a gathering, and I was very pleased to see many of you there.
Thank you so much, Gabriela. This was, I know, a challenging assignment to set a scene in 10 minutes for such a big field. And as you said, we do have amazing panelists to help us dive deeper into some of these conversations in the next hour. And so, but while we still have you here, I will give a little bit more time to our audience to ask questions, to put their questions in chat. I do have an immediate follow-up question. It's somebody who is also in the field and who is curious. Now, you said 67 countries, well, even more signed to the principles, but right, 67 started applying RAM in different ways. And I'm just curious, what do you see as the next step now? Would the idea be implementing RAM in more countries and get all 190 countries on board, or there is some sort of a scaling more in depth? What do you think the next year should look like in this direction of advancing AI ethics implementation? You're on mute, Gabriela.
Yeah, thank you, Branca. Let me say that we are excited about the fact that we receive a lot of support from the Japanese Development Corporation, from the Patrick McGovern, from the European Commission, and not only in terms of the financial support, but also a lot of expertise to do the 50 RAMs that we are doing. We spent 1 year with Alan Turing Institute, and as I said, with Nicola and Emma, developing the RAM, which is not only capacities in the traditional way, in the connectivity, access skills, but it's really the more broader societal debate of what do we need to be doing there. And therefore, first, yes, we need all the countries to do it. It's super important because what the RAM gives you is a photography. And we need that photography. We need to know where countries are. You cannot come to bring the AI experts without borders or the Women for Ethical AI or the observatory to understand better the technologies if you don't know where the country is. And yes, the picture needs to include the connectivity, the skills, the infrastructure, the digital public infrastructure, all the things that are now being discussed need to be there. But then the other part, which is more important, which is the capacity to regulate the technologies, the capacities as governments, as communities, as individuals, even as the business sector, because we always package the business sector in one group as if they are no different. I mean, we have millions of companies that are not using AI, and some of them could use it, and they don't do for fears of mishandling the thing, and some others simply are not in the top notch to be doing that. So it's very important to have that picture right. But then we need to accompany the countries with recommendations. There are 3 countries that have finished their RAMs now: Morocco, Chile, and Senegal. Although we are moving forward with Brazil and Indonesia, there are lots of many others that are coming very, very soon. And what they are doing, which is super exciting, is that they are reviewing the national AI strategies, and they are looking at the governance frameworks that they have to see how do they align or not to the recommendation. And therefore, we are going to have very concrete recommendations that we hope we will be accompanying the countries in the implementation with the AI Ethics Without Borders and the Women for Ethical AI to deliver on it. For example, Chile, very concretely, what happened? They discovered that their privacy laws were not strong enough to deliver for what the recommendation was requesting members to do. They review it. And they review it also the question of who is in charge of it. Very importantly, and this is linked to the discussion in Germany and also in Europe, we are working with DG Reform, which is this area in the European Commission, to think about what kind of institution needs to be put in place to implement the AI Act. And this is very important because the responsibility to regulate or to govern AI is dispersed. the digital ministries have one part, the judicial has another, the education has another. Who is really in charge? And I feel this is really important because then you are turning into the very concrete issue of institutional development. And one of the issues that is fascinating is that this is a dialogue that is not only about developing countries, it's about everybody. Everybody needs to upgrade their institutional settings.
Thank you, Gabriela. We do have a couple of questions, and I will pose this one because we were also curious about this interplay, and you already talked a little bit about this, Gabriela, this ethical and legal standards and how they play together. So how exactly should we distinguish between legal requirements for compliance with fundamental rights and national regulations and genuinely ethical issues that are not codified in law? So if you fulfill legal requirements, for example, transparency of AI, you're acting legally, but what can be ethical in this case? Right? Does ethical now go beyond the legal or legal beyond ethical? And I think this question comes very often now, as you mentioned, with the EU AI Act, when we actually have the first regulation coming to place. Are we leaving the ethics aside now, or how do they play together?
Well, no, and I'm very happy that Emma is here with you because she's the one that's going to be giving a fantastic answer to that question. But let me tell you, how do I see it? The ethical framing is a tool that we all have to think about the outcomes that whatever we do are going to produce. Many times we are so enchanted with the technological revolution that you're not thinking about outcomes. You want to maximize, you want to be more efficient, you want to get systems that are faster, you want to, and at the end, we forget this definition of the human nature to see what are the outcomes. These are super, super disruptive technologies, but they are also super fast. And we have seen them. I mean, we knew that, for example, I have some figures before, the latest technological waves of electricity or telephony, or it took 50 years to reach 25% of the population of the US, 25 years for the radio, and the iPhone took 4 years. And then these technologies are just taking over and over and over. And with ChatGPT and with the generative AI, you see the exponential increase in the capacities. And then, of course, the fear that many people are feeling on not being able to control them. And therefore, you cannot codify everything. You just can't. It will not be possible. But what you need to do is to have these ethical guardrails to decide by yourself, if you are the developer, if you are the government, if you are to say, no, this is not right. This is not aligned with human rights. This is not aligned with non-discrimination. This is not aligned, because it requires a reflection of each one of us, because each one of us are being impacted by the technologies. And more, I mean, look at the young people to reflect how much their interaction with the technology is delivering higher or lower well-being. All of these things I feel is very important. And I'm very glad, because let me tell you, and I finish with this, I spent many years working for the OECD, which is another fantastic institution and very analytical. But I remember that when we released the principles in 2019, I was still the chief of staff. I asked, I like very much these principles, but what is the ethical framework? Because we never mentioned ethics in this. And they told me, no, ethics is with UNESCO. I found it so strange. I said, had I known that I was going to come to UNESCO to be in charge of the ethics work, but it's true. For one reason or the other, we have this fantastic mandate.
That's great. Thanks, Gabriela. We have a quick one on the role of this AI Ethics Without Borders new initiative that you piloted. Can you tell us in a sentence or two what the role of this body will be? Is this where the Global South idea comes into?
No, well, the fact is that you also need to recognize that we need a lot of expertise, a lot. It's true. I mean, it's not a technological conversation, but we need to understand the technologies. And that's why you see that the US and the UK and France are establishing their institutes for AI to understand better. What we're doing, and this is really interesting, is that we are engaging experts from the countries to do the ramps. It's not that we bring experts from the north to go to Senegal to tell Senegal what they need to do. It's a Senegalese lady. Mamadou is an amazing lady. Then you got the people from Chile. They are also the Brazilians. They are from the countries to understand the context and the issues. And you always find the expertise, even if it is one person. But you always find the expertise in these countries. But then, as I said, this is global, and therefore we included all these experts from all over the world, and then with top-notch expertise from the Alan Turing, from you have here with yourself, Nicola, Emma, many people that are already in the AI Experts Without Borders, because at some point, countries will need very, very detailed support, no? If they want to do liability analysis, or if they want to test some of the issues, or they want to understand better how some things might work or not, sandboxes or not sandboxes, then we will be able to have this fantastic network of the AI Experts Without Borders to call on them and send them to wherever the country might need this very specific expertise. So it's like very hands-on, demand-driven, but it's a wealth of knowledge of people that have dedicated a lot of their time in understanding better how these things work.
Great, thanks, Gabriela. Exactly, demand-driven. This is what we were hearing for many years now, that we need an initiative like this. And I know that we are just at the end of our time with you, but I do have a final quick question now, knowing that the German Federal Foreign Office is or started this journey of drafting their own strategy, realizing that they started applying some data-driven projects, generative AI projects in the ministry itself. Is there a word of advice that you would have for them? Is this something that you encounter in other ministries? And what would be an advice that you would give as an AI ethics expert?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. I think it needs to be a very inclusive exercise. For implementing the RAMs, we established a steering committee with all of the ministries that are linked to the thing, because everybody has something to do. You will have the lead institution that needs to deliver on the strategy, but having everybody around the table is super useful. But we also brought the academics, we brought the civil society, very important. And we brought the business sector, because we also have a business council that is helping us with this, with Microsoft and the likes. So I would say a super inclusive process, because even if you think, as going back to where we started, that this is a societal conversation, even if when you need to equip yourself with the experts, and you need to think about how to develop something that is solid now that you are implementing the AI acts, you need to hear from everybody, because it's going to affect everybody, even those groups that might not even understand what you're talking about. But it doesn't matter, because you are serving them, you are representing them, and therefore they need to express their views in a way that is conducive for a more solid outcomes. So I feel this is our main advice. And of course, we would love to do the readiness assessment methodology with Germany. We're working with Germany in the context of our project with the European Commission, but that's one of the issues. Let's see, how do we do a RAM for Germany?
Great. I would love to see that as well, Gabriela. And just to maybe end this conversation with another quote of yours that I heard in Slovenia at the conference, that we love global norms, but we prefer implementation. And I will use this quote for many, many times, because this is, I guess, the advice as well to the ministry and anybody in this field. It's important to commit to the norms, but we need to think about the implementation side of the AI ethics.
You got it, Branca. You're doing also by yourself with these fantastic exchanges and very good contributions that you're making. So thank you so much. Nice to
Thank
be
you
with all
so
of you.
much, Gabriela. Again, thanks for opening the conversation. We wish you all the best, and we are together on this journey. So
Exactly.
We are continuing now with our wonderful panel.
Thank you so
We
much.
got so many things. Thank you again, Gabriela. We got so many things from Gabriela, and I want actually to guide us now directly into the conversation and to welcome again our amazing guests today, Emma Roetkamp-Bloem, professor and head of the Department of Philosophy, Faculty of Humanities at the University of Pretoria. Are you back in South Africa, Emma? I know Emma was traveling a lot. Great, welcome back.
Yes. Thank you.
But we know that Emma was in Slovenia at this UNESCO summit as well. So we are looking forward to hearing more about some other insights that you are bringing from UNESCO conference. We have Nicola Maia, co-founder and CEO of Prisma Eval and chairman of the board of the Future Society. I think Nicola, Future Society, one of the institutions that was first in this space, again, like UNESCO, building the entire ecosystem, opening the conversation to so many countries out there, especially in the global South. And you yourself bring a lot of experience from GPay as well, another important institution, global body that is very active in the AI ethics field. So welcome to the conversation, Nicola. Dr. Chinasa Okolo, who is a fellow in the Center for Technology Innovation in the Governance Studies program at Brookings. Welcome on board. Chinasa is bringing a lot of experience, not only from Africa, but also from India, which I would like to invite as part of our conversation as well. She will be sharing more about this, including more about this new initiative on the global AI ethics standard for the African continent that I mentioned previously. And then in a way, our host today, so Francesca, who is part of this digitalization and strategy department at the German Federal Foreign Office, and behind this amazing process of adopting AI ethics strategy at the Federal Foreign Office. So welcome, Francesca, and thank you also for hosting us for having this conversation, for being interested in bringing principles to practice inside your very institution. So I will give floor to you now, maybe with this order, how I introduced you, starting from Emma. So you give us your first quick several minutes take on the topic. I know it's, again, very challenging to say something in 3 to 4 minutes about the entire conversation, but whatever speaks most to you, what you would like to start the conversation with, please do so, and then we will have a broader conversation with our audience. Emma, would you like to start?
Right, Branka. You said very, very fast, but several minutes. So I'm going to interpret 3 to 4 minutes to also maybe mean 5, but I'll do my best. I think it is important to focus on this question between ethics and specifically human rights. Obviously, international law, in the UNESCO recommendation and also in the UN interim report, it is very clear that in the end, the last word is international law. But if we think from the standpoint of AI ethics, it is clear that we don't think that international law on its own is enough. And the reason for that is there are multiple reasons. The most important one is, people talk about how will you keep up with regulation? Oh, the technology moves so fast. Oh, you're not tired of always running after the technology? No, because we don't run after the technology. Regulation is one aspect of governing AI technology. Building just ecosystems is the other aspect, so that from the bottom up, from the way in which the ecosystem is structured, ethical interaction with the technology becomes natural. And this speaks to answering the question that Gabriela also referred to, of what kind of society is it that we want to build with this technology? What kind of society do we need to build so that this technology benefits all of humankind? And for that, we need ethics. And it isn't one ethics. AI ethics is an adaptive system. And I want to give you a little bit, I'll really do my best not to be too philosophical, But I do want to just give you like a very small taste of what I mean. So, okay, there's another aspect to this as well that I now see in my notes, but I'll just for the second leave it there. But if we want to speak, I want you to think for a little bit about the why. Why is it that we need AI ethics? Isaiah Berlin spoke in the 1960s of positive and negative freedom. Negative freedom is to have the freedom to act in the absence of any obstacle. So there is nothing that stops you. You can basically do what you want. Positive ethics is doing what you want within particular constraints. And that speaks more to collective freedom within a society. So it speaks to self-determination. It speaks to self-mastery. It speaks to control. But in order to be able to realize one's positive liberty, the potential to find ways to navigate constraints and still live an authentic life and still have self-determination, is that we need a particular kind of organization of society. And there's lots of different ways to think about it, but maybe tonight I will just give one, and that is capability theory, which is a philosophical theory of human well-being. So what does it mean? What is needed to live a life of well-being, to live a life of value? And so in this context, it is the duty of governments to ensure that its citizens have all they need to achieve a life of well-being. So capabilities in this sense then is a combination of processes, of tools, of skills, behaviors, organization that enable humans to live lives of meaning and value. So in this sense, people like Martha Nussbaum, for instance, view capabilities as political entitlements that place duties on governments to ensure that their citizens can achieve these lives of value. But in the context of AI, what kind of entitlements will allow humans the positive liberty to not just take meaningful control of their lives, but to also actually fulfill their fundamental purposes in tandem with AI technology? So that's, for me, where AI ethics enters. So we're not considering political entitlements, we're considering ethical entitlements that place duties not only on governments, definitely on governments, but also on the researchers, the designers, the developers, the deployers, and the users of AI technology. So in this sense, AI ethics enables humans to become the best that they can be, and it enables sustainable AI technology, and it helps to build a society that is such that one can benefit from this technology. So concretely, AI ethics translates human entitlements or ethical entitlements, such as the right to privacy, to realize humans' positive liberty. So just to decide, will I sign a consent letter or won't I sign a consent letter? In terms of positive actions for all AI actors, and that is, for instance, to ensure responsible third-party sharing, access to data, and other related issues. So this kind of ethics is enabling, it's bottom-up, it's concrete, and it's adaptive. So I think it is important that, in other words, that we ask this question of what it is that we would need to live a good life in the philosophical sense, a life of well-being, a life of value with this technology. And that's why I think Gabriela talked about the outcomes. It is one thing, we regulate all the processes, and in the recommendation we say that ethics is part of every part of the life cycle of the technology. It is value by design is really important, but ethics is also important in the development. Ethics is also important in the deployment. Ethics is also important in the use, because what is it that we do with the outcomes that are generated by this technology? How is it that we ensure that everybody shares in this technology? And it is important. It is important for the diversity, to maintain the diversity of humankind, and it's important for many other reasons that I hope you will ask me about in question time. So it is not in competition with human rights. AI ethics is an enabler of responsible and sustainable AI innovation, and it is an enabler of good AI governance because it asks what it is that we need to build societies that can help us benefit from this technology and ensure that it doesn't harm the most vulnerable of people, or anybody, in fact. So I hope that's, I think that for me, that's always the most important point. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. This was a great introduction, but also you already raised so many interesting points, and we will come back to them in the Q&A session. But before that, I'll pass the floor to Nicola. Go ahead, Nico.
Sure. Am I audible? Can you hear me well?
We can hear you.
Oh, all right. Let me build upon what Emma just explained or analyzed, and maybe go into the meat of why she had to make that clarification over the relationship between ethics, governance, fundamental rights, and the law. I started this journey of AI governance over 15 years ago. Back then, when we were talking about governing the rise of AI, people thought we were nuts. But the fact of why personally I've been more attached to framing the conversation around an underlying framework of governance as opposed to ethics, is because I have seen, I have witnessed, and in many cases I have suffered from, in a way, the capturing of the debates under an ethical framework, especially by some interest, particularly private interest, to create the conditions to minimize the needed governance and regulatory move. In my experience over the past 10 years, it's been so many cases, or in so many occurrences, the case that people operating or due to operate advanced AI systems were receiving through the ethics conversation the responsibility to develop, deploy in the right way, whereas they did not have the capacity nor the power, let me use the word, the power, to shape that value chain. Emma spoke about an ecosystem. Let me frame it a bit deeper, because 2024 is not 2024. We can now speak about an emerging value chain. This value chain is there to establish norms and practices of shared value, very important, and shared responsibilities over the risks and the opportunities of this technology. And more often than not, I've seen the conversation framed in the context of AI ethics to push the responsibility, in my opinion, unduly over some elements of the value chain considered as the operator. And why I've been trying over the past years to frame it more as a baseline, and I support the clarification that Emma has given, but as a baseline under AI governance, is because at the end of the day, if you want to shape the behaviors of those who develop, of those who deploy, of those who invest, we don't speak enough about the investors because they are up there in the value chain. You need this combination of, yes, self-governance practices with standard operating procedures, yes, soft governance practices with codes of conduct and standards, but yes, at the end of the day, legally binding backstop. Nothing has, is, and will never replace the impact of the law as a binding governance protocol on the behaviors of those who want to govern. And we have seen that with the EU Act, that you can build in a given political economy where the pressure to deploy these not robust technologies hard into the market with hundreds of millions of daily users demonstrating industrial scale demand, but with a technology which is not robust, with such a capitalistic pressure, if you want to build self and soft governance mechanisms, but you do not have a legally binding backstop over a critical size of the given market, you won't get where you want to get. So it's only when you have the legally binding backstop that you can build the standards and the self-governance protocol to get to where you want to go. To give you a very practical example, and I will end there, if you take the case of a judge, for example, here is the custodian of all liberties, the guardians of all liberties. You create a great law, which is the backstop, as I said, to force them to use or not use certain AI technology in certain contexts. You've got the context. Is it sufficient? Is it needed? Yes, in my opinion. Is it sufficient? Far from it. If you put this operator in a position where he or she has the responsibility to do or not do, but does not have the capacity, and I will end with this, the capacity is key. Putting in place a governance regime, including with a legally binding backstop, without immense capacity building effort on those who are supposed to be the implementers, the receivers, the users, directly or indirectly, of these legally binding backstops and the governance mechanism built on top of them. If you don't do this capacity building effort, then it becomes difficult to blame the operator over misuse of the technology. For example, if a judge has no understanding of what generative AI is and is not, and what it's capable of and not capable of, and is pushed in 3 minutes to adjudicate a case over something like that, we should not be surprised if she or he is making a mistake. It's a holistic thing. And we oftentimes brush the capacity building effort under the carpet and push the responsibility where it does not belong. In my opinion, there is way more responsibility and therefore duty on the side of those who develop at this stage, than on those who deploy and use. Just to be clear in terms of the power dynamics and how governance would take into consideration the power dynamics. Compare a developer at OpenAI and someone, let's say, in deep countryside in France or in Tanzania over deploying these technologies. And then ask, where should the responsibility be? And how should you apportion how that responsibility is enacted? Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolas. You brought a really interesting point, and I will come back to this later on this power dynamics and how maybe you can demystify to us how EU AI Act is unpacking this, or if it's unpacking this, right? Taking different sides of companies and different sides of actors in a different ways. But we'll come back to this and to other points you raised. But first, I'll pass the floor to Chinasa. Tell us how this conversation now reflects in African continent or beyond in your broader work.
Yeah, most definitely. Thank you again for inviting me to this conversation. And so to provide more context, I've been working with the drafting committee of the AU AI Continental Strategy for the past 1.5 years or so. And so fortunately, next week, it'll be presented at the AU summit with the heads of states of the 54 member states of the African Union. And so we're looking forward to getting that feedback. We also have an external feedback process that will start around the last week of February. And so I'll be sure to share more about that as well. So overall, I think there are many concerns, but also opportunities when it comes to leveraging AI, specifically in African context. I think it's really important just to really be aware of these concerns. A lot of the literature, fortunately and unfortunately, has been focused on Western contexts, specifically within the United States, also in the UK and the EU, when it pertains to understanding the limitations and also the ethical concerns around AI. A lot of the issues we've seen, especially in the US context, focus on some of the harms that we've seen through facial recognition and also in other automated decision systems, especially as it pertains to the legal field and also healthcare and social services. And so, but however, we've also seen some use cases where AI has been leveraged in places or in contexts like for humanitarian aid, specifically in Jordan, I believe. This was reported by the Human Rights Watch. And so we're beginning to see like how AI will impact the global south more broadly. But again, that I believe there needs to be much more research done to understand how we can move forward towards adopting ethical AI within the African context, specifically because context, or let's say things like race, that do not necessarily apply to many countries within the global south, but also like in Africa. There are some exceptions to this. I would say South Africa is probably the biggest one. But aside from that, I think we also need to understand how things like tribe, religion, and also gender specifically play a big impact on how AI systems can cause harm to populations. And so talking more specifically about the AU AI Continental Strategy, it's broken into 5 pillars. And so I worked on the first pillar, which pertains to human capital development. And so we really tried to emphasize in that it's important to ensure that there is a strong base of humans that or people, that are, qualified and also like educated to help participate in the AI economy. And I think also a big part of that is that not necessarily, we're not necessarily advocating that everyone has to participate in AI, but there has to be ways to educate people to have them be aware of the impacts and also in case and also be ready to leverage or incorporate AI if needed. And then overall, I think that it's really important to understand that there are many use cases where AI should not be considered. Specifically, I believe policing and the legal system is probably the most prominent area. And so thinking about how to get away from the AI hype that we're seeing in terms of AI has to be used or every company has to incorporate AI in some way is something that we should probably sit back a little bit from and kind of take some time to reflect and also think about if it's necessary. And this is a big factor just because we're seeing lots of reports about the climate impacts of AI. And as we all know, climate change is disproportionately affecting countries within the quote unquote global South. And so we have to be aware of how we think about, leveraging and adopting AI in many of these use cases. So thank you.
Thank you, Chinasa. Thanks to all three of you for setting the scene now for the German Federal Foreign Office to tell us, Francesca, how are you finding your way now through all of this complexity of AI ethics field and how this reflects into your work now and your goal of drafting AI ethics strategy for Federal Foreign Office?
Yeah, so I think so far I'm really enjoying this conversation because all those big questions and dimensions you already brought up, we also had when we were talking about our own AI framework we would like to adapt in the foreign ministry context. However, I think all those big challenges that are also like shaping our own framework, like you already talked a lot about the interplay of ethics and law, which is really amazing because like I think that was also our very own first discussion we had, like why would we need that in the first place? And also all those value chain related topics, like you even said capitalistic pressures, like I think we don't use that word in the foreign ministry. However, we were talking about supply chain issues, also power dynamics. I think they are very closely related to geopolitics and also our own national digital sovereignty. All those really, really big challenges and also partly, or not even just partly, but philosophical questions we had to unwrap, to understand, and then in the end kind of to put into practical guidelines, we actually could design and implement and use AI in our own organization, and also to ensure that the outcomes for our organization and also for our foreign and security policy field would be positive. Like it was already said that those are the main objectives we have when it comes to ethics. And I think for this discussion, what I could contribute is just one example of how it could play out in reality, kind of. And I could tell you a bit about our framework we are working on and the process we so far adopted to do so. And I personally would be very interested in a discussion about implementation because we already said that like global norms are a good thing to do, but we should focus on implementation. And I think that's also the point where we are right now in the foreign ministry. And I'd like to give you a short overview of our project timeline and where we're heading to and what we did so far. And then just maybe deep dive very shortly into the why we did that in the first place, just for this first introduction. So our current project timeline is that we have like a 2-page document right now, and that encompasses our AI ethical guidelines, our own self-regulatory framework, and it has so far 8 guiding principles. And the process so far, I think kind of already stick to the suggestion of Gabriela. We also had in this process a consultation with civil society, academia, and also the business sector. And I'd love to tell you a bit more about that later on. And now our next step is also, when we first published our guidelines, also to develop a second document, and that actually deals with the implementation within the organization. Yeah, I think so. That's our current project timeline. And now coming back to the why we did that in the first place, I think our point of view is quite similar to all those point of views already mentioned. Our purpose is to kind of embed our ethical principles to ensure positive outcome within the existing legal framework. And our purpose within the FFO is to have actionable guidance for the design and development of AI. And that obviously must be adapted to our own specific context of our organization. And the main dimension for that is to ensure that we have a modern and capable foreign service, because we need to leverage AI. That is also one assumption you have to make in the beginning. And on the other hand, you have to ensure that our policy environment is also affected in a positive way with AI. So I think that is our main purpose. So we saw the need to adopt a self-regulatory guideline framework. And this framework is embedded in all those frameworks already mentioned, like the OECD or the UNESCO principles so far. Yes, so I think for now, I think that's enough. And maybe we could talk later on a bit about our process and the consultation.
Thank you, Francesca. This is great to understand, actually, to understand internally what is happening in one of the ministry. And I'm curious, maybe our other panelists know if there are other governments, other ministries of foreign affairs that are following the similar pathway. But you gave me this, and basically all of you with all of your interventions made me think about finding the way, right, in all of these processes that are happening at the same time. Now, trying to look at this as an external party, like let's say German Federal Foreign Office, how do you evaluate, how do you see the interaction of all of these processes now? Because as somebody who looks at the field from outside, we see such a vast number of different initiatives happening, right? We saw only 2023 bringing so many events, so many activities, so many documents. How do you see all of them interacting together, and how you would advise, even now, Francesca, maybe you can share your internal processes as well. How did you decide as an institution to follow UNESCO principles or OECD or both? How did you put that in the framework of EU AI Act? I can not even imagine how the thinking process goes around all of that is happening, and many other initiatives out there, right? Nicola, I think Germany is member of GPay as well, maybe even one of the co-founders. So country participating in so many processes on so many different levels now have to find a way to bring all of these processes in a practical way in one ministry. How do you see that happening? And this is an open question to everybody. I think each one of you is a member of many of these initiatives. How do you find them interacting together? Whoever wants to start. Shall we go again, starting from Emma?
Okay. This is a difficult question, and it's maybe one that I wonder if we should know how this would sound, but I wonder if we should really, if this is the question. Is the question about finding a unified framework that takes from everything that is on the table? Or is the question to find ways in particular context in which there would be interoperability and in which there would be value alignment? I think something that is for me a bit dangerous is to only take the intersection, because then we will move away again from what is really important in different parts of the world. For instance, data sovereignty and data ownership is very important on the African continent. And Shanasa can correct me if I'm wrong, but I also live on this continent, and that's one of the most basic things. African data belongs to solve African problems in African ways. And if we only focus on the intersection of all of these frameworks, we will lose that, because it is not at the top of the agenda in the North, because there's a whole different structure in the North. So I rather, if I can just say one last sentence, in the UN advisory body, our focus is not on finding a global AI policy. Our focus is on how can we enable and strengthen individual, national, existing AI strategies. What is it that is needed, and what is it that is needed to enable those countries or member states who do not yet have such strategies to have such strategies? And maybe, just to wake us up, I'm an hour ahead of you. The other reason why I'm saying this is because, and this, I'm not here speaking with the UN hat. I don't have this is me speaking. But, while we say how important international law is, and how important, it's one of the last principles, it's the fifth principle in the UN document, and in the UNESCO recommendation. I don't know, at some point I counted because there was an argument with someone, but I think it's human rights law, standards and principles are mentioned something like 33 times in the UNESCO recommendation. So that's very important. But the political world is not structured only according to international law. The political world is structured in terms of individual countries' sovereignty and their national laws and their national legislation. It's not just international law that has to be abided by. It is national strategies and national legislation that has to be abided by, and that needs to be strengthened. So I'm always wondering when I think of this question, because firstly, I think of all the work I want to die, but secondly, of trying to find this global agreement. But secondly, I think this agreement and interoperability should be a contextual and a temporal thing for a specific reason. Here we find synergy. For this reason, in this context, for this goal. We do say, I don't know, one of the 8 functions, I think the second one is to build a global governance framework. But I'm going to do everything that I can to try and make it as functional as possible and still as specific as possible, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Emma, can I just quickly ask a follow-up question now, thinking about this global framework, and also the role, maybe some audience in the group does not know exactly what the Secretary General's UN High Advisory Body is about, but is it connected with the Global Digital Compact as well as a process? And isn't that a sort of a global framework for all of us to function under one umbrella?
The Global Digital
No matter the AI strategies we are adopting in our own countries. Can you help us understand these processes as well?
Yeah, the idea is that the culmination of the report that we would table to the world towards August, September this year would culminate in the Global Digital Compact. It would have so our work is very strongly aligned with with the objectives of the Global Digital Compact.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Nicola, what is your reaction now to, you have been in this field for, well, you already in your introduction in a way reflected to this and to this relationship of different AI ethics, principles and frameworks and the regulation. Were we on a good path at all in the last decade? Have we invested energy in the right direction then?
Yes, I think we have. I think the vector, the objective is a global governance regime complex that cannot be perfect, that has to be dirty, that has to be imperfect, as I said. Otherwise, it would mean we live in a totalitarian regime. We do not want to live in a totalitarian regime. And so we want this mixed, complex interweaving of norms, because that's the guarantee that we reconcile the global with the plural, pluralism, the respect for self-determination in the way in which we have built the nation states and the international community is a very important thing. For many, the move towards globalization has been a move towards accumulation of power at the center of the top, led by private interests, which has given us immense service, amazing technology. Look at Apple, for example, and the kinds of services that they render to their customers, but their customers are not citizens. And so the driving force of the market has been way stronger and way more efficient than, as Emma was saying, international public law. International public law is an extremely weak instrument of convergence, not only for bad reasons, also because what really primes is national sovereignty as the core translation of the leading identity. Given those constraints, I think we have been moving somehow in the right direction. And as Emma said, we should not chase this elusive dream of a global governance, perfect policy framework, but seek interoperability, seek harmonization. And we are on course towards that. And I will give you maybe two examples. The first one, why do you think at the time of the final negotiations of the EU AI Act, which was, as I said, a strong critical market with a mass, a basic mass that could lead to extraterritorial effects of the regulation, everyone came around. It's so interesting that during the final negotiation of the EU Act, the executive order in the US was published. The UKA Safety Summit took place. Oh, guess what? The G7 also published the Code of Conduct. This was really, in my opinion, driven by the fact that a key market in the world was deciding to put on the table a binding regulation of the same genre of the kind of regulation you'll put for any other general purpose technology, such as electricity. Electricity is regulated. When you turn on a switch on your wall, trust me, everything along the value chain is regulated in one form or another. And the Europeans, in my opinion, were wise enough to follow a similar pathway. And that's why all the other actors were following. And that's why my recommendation to the German Federal Foreign Ministry is really to seek to establish a strong and ambitious Euro-African partnership on AI, built and revolving around the second leg of that regulatory effort, which is, as I said before, capacity building. We need a revolution in capacity building, and we need to enable, for example, African nations to drive capability building and drive the policies in their own ways. And if we forget that governance includes innovation policy, industrial policy, infrastructure, and I say that having advised many countries in Africa on how to develop and implement national AI strategies with the support of GIZ, of the German Technical Cooperation Agency. Like, can we ask Ghana to focus on regulation? No, the market is too small, and they need to focus on enabling innovation, attracting investment, supporting skill development. Can we ask the Europeans to focus on regulation a bit more? Yes. And then we build something strong. But the fact of the matter, talking about Africa, is that is the African Union sufficiently ambitious in the drive it's providing in economic unification? Not necessarily, because the identities across the continent in Africa are not sufficiently converging. There are huge divisions. Let's not brush them under the carpet either. So how do we make that move towards African integration, economic integration with the market, and bring Europeans and Africans across the Mediterranean around an ambitious agenda towards responsible AI adoption? For me, that's really something crucial, which has a very precise set of consequences for Germany, for France, for Italy if we fail. All countries, as demonstrated by the rise of extremists in our elections, are afraid of immigration. Because of the demographic boom in Africa, that fear of immigration has to be addressed in one way or another, when establishing a way to enable African development with AI and through AI in an African way is going to be, in a way, a long-term guarantee of assuaging these popular fears in Germany, in France, in other countries. That's why I mean this strategic Euro-African partnership on AI, as an example, is a key enabler of sovereignty on both sides.
Thanks, Nicola, for sharing this. This is really interesting because it is actually in the center of the work of the Data Innovation Lab, this relationship between European and African ecosystem as well, to see how they interact and how they can work together towards future development of AI ecosystem in Africa. But I think you gave so many interesting points now for Chinasa to react on. Is this what you see as a need in Africa or a path forward, Chinasa, for the relationship with Europe?
Yeah, I would say for me, I think it's really important for any efforts that are focused on Africa to ensure that they leverage agency of African stakeholders. I think it's really important to ensure that we're not, recolonializing Africa just through digital means or through policy measures. And so I think it's there are lots of growing grassroots AI communities throughout the continent that are doing great work and publishing in top tier machine learning and AI conferences that are usually based in the West. And so I think that there also is an opportunity for policy to kind of follow a certain path. We're seeing lots of think tanks pop up and also governments start to have that interest in developing their own respective strategies. I think international collaboration or multi-stakeholder partnerships or multilateral, bilaterals, whatever you want to frame it, is very helpful in advancing these issues. But I think it's also important that in these international conversations, global partnerships or just events, that African stakeholders also and governments be invited to participate fully in these events, excuse me. I had the opportunity to attend the AI Safety Summit in the UK last year. And so I believe correctly, there were only 3 African governments there. I know it was the first meeting, but there's one coming up very shortly. And it would be great to see, more participation in that. And when it comes to efforts like, let's say, the UN High-Level Advisory Body on AI, OECD's AI experts group, and all the others, we're still not seeing enough African representation on that. I think that plays a big role into how, the higher level stakeholders see the potential of Africa to participate fully in international cooperative efforts on AI. And so I think that's a really big part that has to play. So again, you can come in and you can help provide African governments, African stakeholders with the, let's say, like information or power needed to help develop their AI strategies. But once it comes to these broader efforts, I think there also has to be reciprocal exchange and including these stakeholders in these efforts as well.
Thanks, Chinasa. Can I ask a quick follow-up question now? Thanks for sharing those insights from, we don't necessarily always sit in these big international conferences like AI Summit in UK and so on. We did saw, though, the UNESCO, the recent one that Emma also participated in. And Emma, you can correct me if I'm wrong. This is just coming from somebody who watched online externally, but it seemed to me like African presence was very visible there. And a lot of countries from Africa are actually implementing the readiness assessment now. So do you see more this is more as a pathway, Chinasa, and how this UNESCO work reflected now on your internal conversations that you had with the adopting of the African-wide AI strategy?
Yeah, definitely. And also give space to Emma if she wants to speak as well. I would definitely say that I had the chance to, I only attended the recent event in Slovenia virtually, but I was invited to present some work that I've done on reforming data governance to enable AI governance within Africa. And so I think that it's really important, and great to see that this inclusion is increasing. I also want to note that I think there should be a way to figure out, countries that are very far away from, let's say, implementing or integrating AI strategies to think about that. So for example, there are a couple countries within Africa that are experiencing like serious conflict. And just to be very frank, I don't think they're anywhere close to implementing AI strategies. There are other countries that have just very different priorities. So for example, Angola just created a new center from their national national oil company, Sinangol, to help increase innovation in the oil space, and also to help train people towards that. But it's unclear in terms of like how AI comes to play, or any digital technology comes to play in that. And so I think there should be ways to figure out how to enable AI innovation, or just like, moves towards AI and data strategies in ways that align with the existing priorities of countries that necessarily may not be, let's say, like at the forefront of AI innovation already.
Thank you. Francesca, how these conversations now sound to you, and maybe you can now take a chance to tell us a little bit more about this process that you started within the ministry. And I would maybe connect my question also to something that Gabriela said at the beginning, how inclusive this process needs to be. And I think this is one of the elements that really strengthens your approach, this consultation process that you're doing. And basically this conversation today also feeds into that consultation process, right, with different stakeholders and experts out there. But maybe you want to share more about this with the audience, how the entire process actually was coordinated.
Yeah, sure. So maybe we can even combine it, the process on the one hand, and the other question was how all those initiatives and frameworks interact. And I think from our perspective, we are totally with Emma. It has to be functional and also adapted to our specific context. So our guidelines encompass like this political dimension. And I think we already talked a lot about that, like how we collaborate internationally with other nation states, and how we like work together on common guidelines, which is also related again to power dynamics, etc. And then on the other hand, as an organization, we have to look at our own capabilities, because if we have no structured processes or innovation-friendly environments, we can talk a lot about AI, but in the end, we actually have no power about maybe our own algorithms, because we have no experts in developing them, or we have no staff that actually wants to work or interact with AI. And so our challenge was to integrate this external and internal dimension, and also to do the stretch between a ambitious strategy that actually says we want to enhance human rights and we want to have a positive outcome for humanity, and on the other hand, to actually do something that is pragmatic and like practical and possible in our daily practice. And I think that's very hard for an organization, because AI is so much about ideals and politics and like things we just can't solve from today, like just right now. I think our guidelines have to encompass like this ambitious point of view, and on the other hand, to have actual like practical guidance for our daily business. And we try to put that in our consultation with civil society, business, and academia. And I think that's also so interesting, because if you look like from a academia perspective on it, we have like all those big questions, like philosophical ones, etc. But then you talk to an IT expert, and like he's like talking about hardware and software and all those like other issues that are also very important, because if we don't understand our own software because we like buying from the US, in the end, you're not really sovereign. And I think in our consultation that becomes like evident that there are so many dimensions to it that we just can't possibly encompass all of them just in like 2 pages. And we talked like about climate protection, digital sovereignty, standards and norms that already exist, certifications. So we had a huge stretch from like really abstract discussions, like to like really, really tiny things. You nevertheless can spend like a huge amount like of time just on like that. Yeah, and I think that's still our challenge, to encompass all those things that AI raises. And our consultation, therefore, like one key takeaway is certainly that AI should not be an end in itself, and that we have to define the areas of application for a positive outcome, and that certifications are essential for us, and that we need like systematic impact assessments, risk management, and in the end, that every AI procurement is indeed political, because like the whole development process of AI should be taken into consideration, which is kind of actually, to be honest, an impossible task, like right now, at least for our capabilities in Germany. Yeah. I think that's like a broad picture about our consultation.
Thank you, Francesca. And as we are slowly approaching the end of conversation, and I still have so many questions to ask, but I would like to open the floor to you as well to ask something to panelists. Francesca, if you have any direct question, I do have one, because I know for Nicola, for example, you were advising many governments through the Future Society, or you personally, right, in this pathway to AI adoption or AI ethics processes. What I'm noticing more and more in this entire ecosystem, that governments are now slowly taking the role of implementers as well, right? It's not only the role of somebody who is shaping the documents, the principles, or even the regulation, right? In EU AI Act conversations, how strong countries were coming in with their suggestions and recommendations, but they're actually becoming not only users, but designers of these technologies. So is there anything changing now by them becoming or taking this new role into their hands? And do you see this as a proper pathway for other countries as well, what Germany is doing now with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Should each ministry now be taking these principles and putting them to practice? Or there is some alternative way to actually enable this? And this is a quick one, maybe a question for everybody before we wrap up the conversation.
Few quick points. AI is moving so fast and it's so pervasive that each and every actor should engage into a strategic planning effort, therefore a strategy. So I welcome the effort from this ministry as much as I welcome the effort from all key actors who need to do the same thing to shape their action in a responsible way within a strategic framework. That's I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. Now, let's be clear and honest here. Most of these ministries, especially in the global majority, do not control the means of production of AI. You said that they develop the technology, they don't. And why I was mentioning the Euro-African partnership is because the Europeans are afraid of being an AI colony of the US, as much as many in Africa were afraid, rightly so, of neocolonialism in the continent. And that's why I see here an interesting need, an opportunity to reshape the power dynamics and find this alliance in a post-colonial way, in an emancipating way. And that's why in a lot of my actions and work in Africa, my focus was not on regulation, which would have potentially slowed down adoption initially because of the small size of the market that would have driven away private investment, but was really focused on innovation, adoption. And in that context, ethics, as opposed to start with regulation, was very useful, because the key is to focus on adoption. If you don't adopt, you cannot climb back the value chain. But it's not because that you adopt that you would climb back up the value chain and tomorrow build semiconductor in Nigeria. It's simply not a reality. The Taiwanese are so far ahead that even, let's say, the Germans or the French are just starting to get back on the semiconductor value chain. That's why we need to act responsibly in a realistic way vis-a-vis the reality of the value chains in their vertical concentration.
Thank you. Chinasa, would you like to be next?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would say this is a great conversation. I think there's lots of paths forward. And so I think there just should be intentional collaboration. And, you know, again, leveraging sovereignty and autonomy in terms of how countries are enabled to pursue or proceed with AI regulation, and governance is the most important part in my opinion.
Thank you, Chinasa. And Emma?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that Nico is saying. It's incredibly important to take from every region of the world and every country where they are with what they have, while enabling them to become stronger in terms of being prepared for AI. I cannot stress that enough. And there I just want to take, just also say, I hear, so many, and in Slovenia also, the number of times that people say no one should be left behind. And then, I mean, this sounds like very negative and it's a very positive thing, but you can see that sometimes people say that and they think, oh, thank God, I'm not in the region that will be left behind. Everybody is going to be left behind if we don't get our act together. This is collective harm. And that is why the North should also be engaging in UNESCO's RAM, because everybody should know where they are, what do they have, and where are they going to. I cannot stress this enough. Thanks. I can't say it as elegantly as Nico can, but yeah, that's my message. Thanks.
It's great. Thanks, Emma. It is at the same time both the positive and negative conclusion that we have, but let's keep it on a more positive note, because I think conversations like this one are contributing that nobody is left behind. And maybe to give the last, before we close the session, to give the last word to Francesca.
Yeah, really short. I'm just adding on to the former speakers. I think also the AI, also from a point of view of the FFO, is about power dynamics and democracy, and that we really need to get our act together. I think that's a nice sentence, to actually counteract the existing dynamics. And I think that collaboration and, in the end, money is simply our way forward. Together with a democratic, international, processes, so that actually no one is left behind who has no money. And I think that's a challenge that we just not see with AI, but also in every other political field.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Chinasa, Nicola, and Francesca. This was a wonderful conversation. I think you gave us so many things to think about, so many things that we can apply further in the Federal Foreign Office work, but also thinking beyond this, right? Thinking about the entire ecosystem, thinking about adaptive ethics, and thinking about how all of us actually have a conversation and role in this. So with this, I would like to again thank you all, and to thank the Data Innovation Lab and the entire team for organizing this session, and for really putting the AI ethics and AI governance in the center of its work. Thank you again, and I wish you all the best in your future work. Thanks for being part of this ecosystem. We really appreciate you.